Hi, loves. Welcome to a new episode of the AW Confidential podcast, where nothing is confidential. Today's guest is an award winning technology leader with over 20 years of experience leading teams at Microsoft, Salesforce, and tech startups. The list is too long, so I shortened it. Julissa, Julissa Germosen is also the CEO of Mariposa Blanca, a business strategy consulting firm. In 2005, she established the Latina Leadership Potential Award at Rutgers University, the first for a woman of Latina descent. But her achievements don't stop there. The Latina is a highly sought after speaker and author of a book that was just released September 2024, Latina Madrina: Stories, Lessons, and Hard Truths from a Brown Latina in Tech. Now, you know I love that title. The fact that she said Brown Latina in Tech, that's a seller. That sells itself. Now, the icing on the cake for me is that this powerhouse is Dominican, just like yours truly. Welcome, Julissa.
Thank you so much, Yvette. What an introduction. Thank you so much. I
Well,
love,
girl, I had
love,
to shorten
love
it. First of all, thank you for taking the time to be here, and congratulations on so many wins.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an incredible week. The book dropped on September 15th, the start of Hispanic, Latinx, Latine, whatever you want to call it, Heritage Month. So it's just been an incredible week, but I'm just really thankful and grateful to be on your podcast, to meet you, and that our worlds have connected. So I think this is going to be a fun chat, and I'm just looking forward to it.
And the start of a beautiful friendship. I believe that.
Yeah.
We were talking for the past 30 minutes before I hit record, people. So so this I do my research, as everyone knows.
Yep.
And in preparation for this interview, I came across an interesting article. I should send it to you,
Yeah.
from September 2024, from the Washington Post, that
Mm.
reports that the numbers for women in tech have barely moved in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Literally, it's like almost nothing.
Right.
And I also read that in 2022, 22.6 of percent of workers in high tech roles were women. 22.6 in 2022.
Yep.
I mean, that barely scrapes the pot of what is the
For
tech
sure.
industry. And
Yep.
you're telling me on top of that that it's barely moved. So the underrepresentation of women,
Mhm.
African Americans, Latinos in our country, period, is evident. And it really is deeply troubling for
Yes.
us. Now, coming from that industry, from corporate America, what was that experience like for you in an industry that not only was made up of mostly men, but
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, mostly white men?
Mhm. Majority white,
Mm.
and Asian,
Mhm.
white Asian, including South Asian. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
But mostly white.
yeah.
Yes.
So what was that like for you?
So I'm going to share what that was like for sure, but I just want to pause and reflect on the numbers you shared because frankly, it's just outstanding, but not in a good way, right? It's
Mhm.
really when we think about where we are in 2024 and the importance of representation, right? The tech industry who are building products, building social media platforms. We are on a Zoom call recording right now. This industry that's serving a population across the US that's so diverse. And when you think about the numbers of Latinos within the United States and worldwide, in the United States alone, 67.5 million Latinos. So the tech industry, corporations are serving us as a market. We are a sought after demographic, and yet the creators are not having people within their organization that can form the product to serve us. There is a major disparity. So I just want to reflect on those numbers because there is a misalignment there, the customers and then the creators. So I'll share a couple more data points. Not that I want your audience to be like filled with all these numbers, but I just
Well,
think
the
it's
numbers tell a story, so I'd
they
appreciate
tell a
it.
story. Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about Latinas, there was just a report that came out on Latinas in Corporate America by leanin.org and McKinsey. Less than 2% of Latinas in all corporations are in leadership positions, so director and above, right? And then less than, compared to over 70% male and over 30% of female overall. And then less than 1% of Latinas are in the C-suite. It's like you are a fraction of a percentage point. So I want to kind of set that context because you asked me what that experience was like, and I've been in tech for over 20 years. And I've got to tell you, the journey has evolved. I am grateful for my career. I've had an incredible career, but there have been moments, times where I am the only, right? And what does that do to you and for you? When you're the only woman of color, the only brown woman, the only Latina, the only multiracial, and you're working in an environment that I write in this book that was not built for us. It just wasn't, right? And so the reason I wrote this book, and one of the reasons was really to provide some guidance for other Latinas and other marginalized groups so that they are well prepared to work in an environment that quite frankly was not built for us. So
Did you
yeah,
find did you find yourself that you had to assimilate into the environment and change who you were? What do they call this? Code switching, which I think
right.
a lot of us have done.
So I do believe early in my career, so what's really interesting is I started at a minority-owned tech company. So I worked for a Black-owned and woman-owned tech company in Newark, New Jersey, Gateway Center, not far from
Wow.
where I am right now, about a half an hour. So it was really incredible. And I was the only really Latina in that, or maybe there was another Latina. And it just was a really interesting experience because that is where we built the business. That is where I formed the partnership, the strategic alliance with Microsoft, right? And so initially there wasn't any kind of code switching, right? It was a different culture, but I integrated with that culture, right? So, and then when I started at Microsoft, because I was recruited from there to Microsoft, and I spent 14 years there.
Congrats.
Well, thank you. There was an element of not necessarily code switching, but I need to be I need to be one way at work that wasn't necessarily all of me. Do you see what I mean?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
but I integrated who I was because the talents that I was able to bring to the organization from, like Latinos, right? We're people, most of us, right? I'm not going to generalize, but the majority, we have learned our networking skills from our families. We have learned how to relate to different people. We have learned how to read the room. And so those kinds of skills, that kind of strategic thinking, I was able to bring. So that, not code switching, bringing myself, but did I feel like I could bring my full self? It took a very long time to figure out that my full self is pretty freaking amazing and a gift.
Especially after as you went up the ranks. It must have
Yeah.
gotten harder and harder.
Actually, it gets better and better. I actually don't think it's harder. And this is why
Oh.
I encourage Latinos, BIPOC, any marginalized group to go for the leadership roles. Because when you are a leader, you're not able to influence the organization. You're not able to influence culture. And you're now able to hire and grow teams so that they are able to bring their full self. The reason I believe, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
No, no,
that
no.
a lot of this is happening, this othering. I talk about othering in the book, right? In corporate and in many spaces not created for us, is because we don't have enough leaders at the top setting the example and setting the bar. If we did, I think this, I'm not saying it'll go entirely away. I don't believe that, right? Because you can't really change bias. We all have it. But I think there would be less of it when there's a more diverse and inclusive, environment.
And okay, let's get real. And
Yeah,
that all sounds beautiful, but being that I was in a corporate environment, first of all, I didn't see anyone who looked like me at the top. Not only that, but and I think this comes from I've had a lot of therapy, but I think it comes from, my childhood and growing up Latina, growing up minority. But
yeah,
I found that, and you mentioned this in an interview, you said that we are raised to work hard, keep our heads down, and be humble. And that is exactly what I was doing throughout that time that I was in corporate America. You know that I just realized this maybe I want to say a year or two ago. I wouldn't even put on a red lipstick or speak up at a meeting because I didn't want to call attention to myself. I
yes,
didn't well, I do like my hair straight just because I think it goes with my personality. But I wouldn't wear the curly hair. There's so many things that I because I didn't want to stand out. So, and I'm saying this out loud because I
yeah,
truly believe that I am not the only one
you're
that
not.
has been doing these things. So, when you're feeling that way, keep your head down, work hard, be humble. They'll notice how it's a shift that is
Yes.
really hard to make if you're not even speaking about these things like you and I are right now.
So I have done and felt all of that. All of
Thank you.
that. Yes, that is so common. I mean, I do love my hair straight and I also love it curly. So I've worn it both
Well,
ways,
you have beautiful curls.
Thank you, thank you. And but I have felt that way because that is what we have been conditioned to think in our culture. Straight hair is better, the European traits,
Yeah,
and it's more professional, right? And so
yeah.
I've done that. One thing, I was a little bit of a rebel in some ways because I
Oh.
loved putting on the red lipstick and I did it deliberately. I did it deliberately and I would do
Oh.
it for years. Now it's more the muted colors. That's why I don't have the red right now.
No, I when listen, I love red lipstick now. It literally, but I had to build up the confidence. I
Yes.
had to get
Helpful.
comfortable in my own skin and say, "You know what? I'm gonna do me. I am pretty freaking
Yes.
awesome. So, yeah,
Yes.
I'm gonna do this."
Exactly. You are. And the other thing that you mentioned is, you know, the idea of like what we've been raised to as immigrants, right? As first gen, as from well-meaning, right? From our parents and grandparents and elders and all that. But to keep your head down, work hard, and your accomplishments would be noticed, and how that does not work for us. So
No.
I had to learn by observing what other people were doing. I had to learn, not because I had someone that looked like me, but I was like, well, look at this person. This person's not really a nice person like me. Yet they are boasting about their achievements.
Yeah.
They are able to articulate what they've done, and they're talking to the right people who are able to get them to places that they want to go. So I started, being a learner and studying other people and how they were. And sometimes it wasn't, let's be honest. Sometimes it wasn't right or ethical or, um, putting other people kind of throwing people under the bus, right? Sometimes, in this kind of competitive environment, you see all kinds of things that are not necessarily things that you would want to do, but you're observing other people. So I had to learn what I am doing is not working, particularly when performance review time was coming around and when
Yeah.
raises and bonuses and percentages. So I had to learn on my own, right? Because I didn't have examples in my family to help guide me. So I had to also attract mentors and sponsors to help me figure this out. And the majority of people, like we were talking about, before this interview started, did not look like us. So like, thank you, right? Grateful for our allies, grateful for our sponsors. But
Absolutely. And they
we
are there.
we did the work so that they're attracted to us, so that they can help us. So yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned, because you're being honest about your experience. There are, and someone, a guest came on about a year ago, and we had sort of we touched on the topic of like microaggressions,
Yeah.
and how, that's something else that we have to deal with on top of everything else. Did
Yeah.
you ever experience anything like that?
Constantly. Constantly. So, and I think we all
And
have.
and how
And
did you deal with it, which I think will be helpful for a lot of listeners.
yes. So I'll just tell you, I don't, because I've had, like a long career, I don't know if I've always dealt with microaggressions well. I think for me, in the very beginning to mid, when I was growing in my career, I think I was always very surprised that this was
Oh,
happening.
wow.
I just was very like a deer in headlights situation, right? When these things would happen. And so, like, I'll give you an example. I'm in a meeting, because when I show up for a meeting, I'm not thinking like of the color of my skin or whether I'm a woman. I'm trying to just achieve a goal, right? And I remember this person in the meeting said, "Oh, I think you should join this organization. It's called uh, it was a professional organization for African Americans in tech." This person happened to be of another race, not African American, but another race. And so he mentioned this. And at the time, I was very active with a Hispanic tech organization, right? Membership organization. He mentioned this, and immediately I thought, he doesn't understand my identity. He doesn't understand my Latinidad. And here I am put in a position. This is a business scenario where I have to explain myself. I said, "Thank you. I appreciate it, but I'm actually Hispanic and Dominican, and I am a member of this organization." Like, pause for the awkward silence, because I believe I did this in a respectful way. But what that does to you, and what that did to me, is to make me feel like you don't see me. You don't
Mm,
understand me. You don't understand my background. For some reason, I knew his racial makeup. I also knew his faith,
wow.
right? And we never had a conversation about this, but when that happens, you start thinking, you think I'm somebody I'm not. I am being put in and now I'm here being put in a position to help you understand when I didn't ask for this. That is a microaggression that consistently makes you feel like you don't belong. You're not understood. You've got to explain yourself. So these types of things and others, sort of happen, and that's kind of the impact, right? And the effect that it has on you. So, and then other scenarios where I have to think, is the conversation worth the battle?
That's
That
such a good point.
Because sometimes when it's one-on-one, like it happened with this person, it's like, this is a teachable moment, because I'm not gonna have you think that I'm something I'm not, or an identity that I don't identify with. I'm an immigrant. I did not grow up in this country, right? I mean, I grew up in this country, but I came from another country, right? So I have to now tell you this situation. But there's other scenarios when you're in a meeting and you're looking to achieve a goal, and something is said about an ethnicity, your gender, or there's an assumption made about your family background. There's sort of this myth that all Latinos happen to be poor. No, there are wealthy Latinos, like they're middle class Latinos, like they're right. We're not a monolith, right? And so there's assumptions made that are not necessarily they're assumptions. and there's biases. So there are scenarios where you've got to make the decision for yourself, what is worth it and what is not. So
I
I
like
have
that.
through, you know, where is this gonna, where, everybody has to make those decisions for themselves. So there's some things that are just not, and then there's others where you need to call it out, even
I
in
love
front of
that.
other
I
one-on-one.
love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think it makes so much sense because sometimes it's, you're fighting a losing battle and do you really want to? So I think you have to ask yourself, is it a teachable moment or is it a losing battle? And you can,
Is this relationship worth it? Like, is this a long-standing relationship that I
uh,
want to make better, right? That I want to make better.
that's,
We need to like bridge that divide,
I love that.
or is this a relationship where,
Absolutely.
nope, it's fine.
Absolutely. Now, I have to ask you about your book. I can't let you get away with not talking about it a little bit. So your book, Latina Madrina, it's not a memoir, which
It is not.
I'm glad it's not a memoir. It's more of a reference guide. So
Yes.
when you wrote it, because I remember when I wrote my first book, and I thought about, I sort of imagined who I was writing it for, what I wanted them to feel when they closed that last page. So when you wrote it, who was your intended audience in your mind? And what do you hope the key takeaway is after we finish that last page and close that book?
Yes. So I wrote it for two specific audiences. The main audience is for Latinas in tech or corporate, right? But mostly Latinas in tech, because that's been my experience, right? I wrote it for them. And then the second audience was for any white, non-Hispanic person in the C-suite who wants to become or is an ally. So they're kind of like the butterfly on the wall, right? It's not their experience, but they want to learn. I didn't want to say the fly on the wall, you know what I mean? But like the butterfly on the wall, so that they can hear and understand someone else's experience, our experience. So it was really those two. And I did a very similar thing. When I was writing, I thought about all the Latinas and Latinos too, Latinx across, because I mentor across all the genders. But I was thinking about this group as I wrote it. And what I wanted them to know and to feel and to understand is that there is someone who looks like them, that understands their experiences of what, not only what's happening to them in corporate, in tech, but I can give you some actionable things that will help you, because I didn't have that. I didn't have
Mm,
that. And so I want them to have these strategies, these tactics, these things that I had to learn, that took me years to learn, right? To come into my own. I'm just offering this to you so that they can be helped in their journey. And I honestly wanted them to feel like less alone.
that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Yeah.
Your book, that was one of
Yes.
the reasons.
Yes.
Yeah. I think because I have felt many times so alone in my career, and that's not a fun place to be. You know what I mean? It's just
Uh,
not a great place to be. I wanted I just wanted to write this so that they know, like a madrina, like a madrina cares for you, loves you, and you know,
Looks out for you.
yeah, they look out for you, they tell you the truth. Like, I didn't want to sugarcoat anything. I didn't want to like, there's so few Latina leaders, there's just so few, that those that were sharing, I was like, it cannot be that easy, because it hasn't been easy for me, and I'm a leader, like so I didn't want to gatekeep a lot of the lessons. I I didn't want to sugarcoat, and I also wanted them to know I am learning too. It's a continuous, I don't feel like I've arrived, or I don't feel like I've got all the answers. I am constantly learning as well. And
We all are, girl.
yes, yes,
We're all learning. And now that you mention learning, one of the things that I went to through during the process of writing my book was I learned so much about myself
hmm
as I was writing.
yes.
So I'm curious, did you learn anything new about yourself during your writing process or have any aha moments?
I think the hardest thing for me in writing is, I think one of the hardest things is, when you're writing, it's sort of like, how much are you going to share and reveal that's really private and personal and impacts other people? You know what I mean?
I
Like,
know, I know.
you wrote,
Mine was a memoir, so trust me, I know
oh,
exactly what you're talking about.
wow, yours was a memoir. I don't even know. Like I you know
Yeah.
Mark Twain, he kept journals and then he's like published them 100 years after I'm dead.
I burned mine.
I think I may have to burn mine too because I've been keeping journals since I was a teenager. I
Oh
write
my
every
god, I was 14 the first time I picked, yes,
look at
the
that.
first
Oh my
time I
goodness.
wrote. Yeah, those are way gone.
Yeah,
Take
yeah.
those to the grave.
Yeah, I think about that, but I definitely want to keep it for my daughter. I know she won't publish it or anything, but I want to keep it just so that she can like understand her mom a little bit better. But
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. So my daughter's 21 and my daughter started reading my book and she was like, "Mom, you know what? Maybe I'll pick it up again another time." She couldn't finish.
couldn't do it. Okay, all right. Yeah.
So
My daughter read this book, but it wasn't a memoir. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Maybe we burn it.
I'm like, let me think about that.
But what I wanted to say is that that was the hardest part, right? Like what because I've worked for some major companies and I'm getting like real, right? That I promise. I was like, I promise you I'll keep it real. So there's some things that, you know, and that I couldn't keep personally.
Right.
And then other things that like, I'm gonna say this, don't come for me. You know what I mean? I'm gonna write this, don't come for me. But so making those, that was a hard decision. That was really,
Mm.
really tough. And
Wow.
so yeah, that is tough. But I think what I have written is, and there's more, I may write another book, most likely, in a couple of years, because there's way too many lessons and too many things, you know what I mean? So I think this is just like, V1, but I think that was really hard. And also, like I mentioned, family stuff. Like you gotta
Mm.
gotta just, you know what I mean?
Haven't gotten to that one yet,
Yeah.
but we'll see. Like you said, I think we all have a couple of books inside of us. Trust me.
I
It's just a matter of are you willing to share?
willing to share how this impacts others, because it's like, yeah,
So talking about sharing, you
yeah,
shared quite a bit at an in you did an interview with BronxNet. I think the show was called Open.
yeah.
And in the interview you talked, and this was particularly interesting
Sure.
to me, so I just want to touch on it.
Mm,
You said something like growing up Latinos, and I know that is true for me, we have this, it's, I'm not sure if it's an unhealthy, complicated, um, or both relationship with money. It's perceived as evil or as greed or as something bad. And, I think that's part of all these, I don't know, these self limiting beliefs and all these, you know, barriers that we put on ourselves. And I really want to know because you have um overcome quite a bit from
mhm.
what you've shared and what we've talked about a little bit. So, how did you overcome any self-limiting beliefs? Because I think we all have them.
Yes.
Um, can you share a little bit about those? Because I think it's important, because unless we don't deal with our stuff,
Yeah.
these self-limiting beliefs and and trauma and all these things, we there's no way we're going to know what we're capable of, and
Yeah.
and and meet who we're really meant to be, because I think we're all a work in progress.
Yep. We sure are. I think so I'm not just going to talk about like limiting beliefs with money because
No, no, in general.
I had a pretty significant like traumatic event happen when I was young, and and I write about it in the book, and in the TEDx, I talk about it in the TEDx. So when it came to money, like I always knew, because I had that traumatic event, that I will never be poor. Like I believe that that traumatic event happened, that took something that was really hard. And as a 5-year-old, I said, this will never happen to me. Now, the generational trauma from that is that like I was obsessed with the success because I never wanted to be homeless. I was like, the rent will always be paid. The mortgage will always be paid. I will eat ramen noodles every day as long as I have a home, you know? So there's, good and bad there. But in terms of like limiting beliefs, what I don't know, there was this, so early on, it's very strange, and I'm sure this has happened to you because you're so successful and you've done so much in your life and your career too. There's something inside of us that knows that we want more. I just remember growing up, in Brooklyn when I was a little girl before, we moved to like the suburbs of New Jersey. And I looked around me and I just was like, this is not my reality. I'm just here for now, right? And you're shaking your head because it's
Oh,
like, there
my
just
my eyes are getting watery. Yes.
and I just believe I'm just here for a moment. We just emigrated, like, and you know, my dad had businesses in DR. You know what happens in DR with the dictator and Trujillo and the overthrow of the
Mhm.
government, and people who were, doing well, suddenly, people are being taken from the homes. There's so much trauma from our country and our history. We had to start over. And so I learned a lot of lessons, thank God, from my parents. Like, okay, you can have success one day, you can have money one day, and then you have nothing, and then you make it up. And so
Mhm.
I just know for me, I just believe that it was like something inside of me, God, I believe something that I just knew what I am seeing around me and what is happening around me is not forever. This is not my reality. This is not where I'm going to end up. And that kind of carried me.
I
And,
promised I wasn't gonna cry today, so
oh,
I understand exactly what you mean.
and then, so I'm not saying that to say that I've never had limiting beliefs, because let me tell you right now, even today, I'm like reading my affirmations because there's some things that I'm like, okay, I want to think big. I want to speak at the UN. I want to speak at the World Economic Forum. I want my book to become a Netflix special. I am saying this right now on this podcast and to you because this is what we've got to do.
And you better come back when all that happens. I'm gonna hold you to it.
Yes, hold me to it, and you hold me accountable. You know what I mean? Hold me accountable. Like, so there are things that we want. We just have to like, what do we really want? And I write about this in like the first part of the book, The Foundational You. For many years, I did not know what I really wanted. I knew that I wanted to be in tech. I knew that I wanted to be part of this industry. I knew that I wanted to be a lot of things, but I really didn't have the skills developed and like the internal, like the I didn't do the internal work to say, what do I really want? And how can other people help me? Because what I realized is, I remember a Dominican leader. Oh my gosh, he's gonna know who he is because there's not a lot of Dominican leaders in tech. But I remember he asked me, Julissa, what do you want? Like he was willing to mentor me. I could not answer.
Wow.
I didn't really do the work. So we've got to prepare ourselves to understand what we really want. And then once we know what we want, we've got to deal with those limiting beliefs that we've put upon ourselves and just dream. This book came from a dream. My TEDx came from a dream. It's just, what do I want? And I thought about it and I wrote about it and I was like, okay, this happened. Now, what else do I want? Okay, this happened. I wanted to go on a mission trip with my church. I did it. Like I've always wanted to for years. For years I wanted to, but the moment that I said, this year it's going to happen, it just happened. So I just believe in, if you will always have limiting beliefs, but we got to just catch our thinking, we've got to just catch what we're thinking. And then we've got to work on our hearts, our minds, and our brains to just think about what we really want and focus on that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you for sharing that. And I have to I have to mention her because we spoke about her before we started, and now I have to bring it up. And I have the clip saved, and I can't say it verbatim, but I remember there was an interview with Oprah where she was asked, "Why do you think most people don't get what they want?"
I know that
And she
interview.
said, "Because most people don't know what they want, and that is the first step to getting where you wanna go."
Yes.
Oof.
Yes, and it's so interesting. This is why we love Oprah, right? This is why we want like to be in her, in her universe, because there's so much wisdom there. When I realized it for myself, it became a game changer because this is what happens. We sometimes follow what everybody else is doing. And I even have to be careful of that now. Like my followers on LinkedIn and my, almost 200 on Instagram. It's so tiny, you know what I mean? But it's like so easy to like, oh, I just want this. I want to make an impact. Well, what do I really want? Do I want to post every single day? I want to post the good stuff because there's so much, even if I miss a day, like Wednesday, I took just a rest day just to enjoy this week because it was, I wanted to slow down. I wanted to take time for myself to meditate, to pray, to just be still. Like it becomes, the book just launched on Sunday. It becomes this tidal wave because so many great things are happening. But I don't want to post every day. But then I was like, I missed Wednesday. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so much. I'm behind. Now I'm behind. But what do I want? Do I want to continue that? I've got to make that decision. We've got to slow down.
And you want to be intentional. You don't wanna just do it
Yes,
just to do it, because
just
then
do it. That is the crowd. That is doing what everybody is doing. And do we really want that? So that's what I'm asking myself and pausing to make sure that I'm really just doing the things that are important to me. They may not always be what the crowd is saying and the most popular thing and all that
well,
stuff.
you are a leader, not a follower. So
Yes. Right.
so one of the things that I love to do. I'm sorry?
We set our own pace, right? The pace that we want.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I love to do at the end of interviews is close out with a quote, mantra, or piece of advice.
Mm,
And I want to ask you, as you reflect on your journey and what is everything that's happened and is happening and will happen, just the journey, what would be Latina Madrina's best advice that can help others create the life they envision? And it looks different for everyone.
yeah.
But what is your not your Latina Madrina's best advice?
Gosh, that's a lot of pressure, right? Because
Hey,
that,
it could be a quote, mantra, piece of advice,
yeah.
something your mom told you or your um
You know,
dad.
I think one of the biggest thing is, you are perfect and beautiful just as you are. You
Mm.
are just enough, just being
Ah,
you. I just
my
so believe that. I just so
my
believe
favorite,
that. Like you don't
my
have to
favorite.
do anything. You can
You are
just
enough.
you are enough. And so that for me, I just would, if I can just tell that as Latina Madrina to all the other Latinas that I mentor, Latinos, or like, that is it. I would end with that. And I would love for them to just embrace that in their
I
hearts
love
and in their minds and in their soul and in their spirits.
that. Thank you for that. So one of the I have been surprising my guests. One of the things that I have been doing, I'm playing this game called We Connect, and
Mm,
this is my deck, and I'm gonna pick a random card, and you,
I love
if you
it.
want to play,
Okay, let's play.
I'm
Let's do it. Of course.
I'm gonna select a card.
Okay.
Ooh, how well would you get along with your clone?
Oh my gosh, we'd have so much fun. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? We would never sleep. We would be traveling all over the place. We would be cheering each other
Where
on.
would you go? Where would you go?
Oh, well, I want to go to Japan. I want to go to Thailand. Let's go to Korea. The furthest east I've gone is Australia. Like, let's just spend 3 months, like just hopping around Asia. Oh my goodness.
Well, I know we'll know what you'll be doing when you write your next book. You're gonna travel the world and write. That's what you're
Yes,
gonna do.
yes,
I'm
yes,
manifesting that for you. Wait,
yes.
and I need to make sure I ask you TED Talk. I looked, I couldn't find it. TEDx
Yes.
Talk.
So it is with, we're finalizing it now. It's with the TED organization. I don't have a launch date. I recorded it in April. I actually was doing email right now about it. So it will launch likely this fall. So keep on the lookout in the next month or two, or before the year ends.
So no
And
title yet that you can share, not yet.
there's a working title, but it's essentially about the Latino state of wealth in the US.
Oh, I love. See, I'll be watching. I'll be watching.
That'd be great.
And where can we find your book?
So latinamadrina.com, you can go there, and amazon.com, you can buy the book, and you can, when you're on my website, you can also join the newsletter. So we're gonna, build that community, and I share a lot of tips in the newsletter as well. And I'm
And the
on,
best way to find you. We want to make sure we find you on socials.
yes, LinkedIn, my name, Julissa Germosen, and I'm on Instagram, and me and my 50 followers on TikTok are hanging out and having a blast. Like, I'm still trying to figure out that platform.
Girl, you focus on one because at a
Oh my
time,
God. I
because
know.
honestly, it's a lot.
Yes, yes.
Julissa, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your journey and just being a ray of light among the
Thank
craziness that is happening in the world.
you, Yvette. Back at you. You're a ray of light, and just really appreciate you and our time together. And yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of AW Confidential. Talk to you soon.
Yay.